I want to start off this video exploring things that have worked better for me than Lazaris techniques by highlighting a few of the Lazaris techniques that have worked better than other similar techniques, namely healing the inner child, healing the inner adolescent, working with self-esteem and turning that into a checklist, and the morning meditation. So those are areas within the Lazaris repertoire of programs and techniques that work better than anything else for facilitating well-being. I'd also put Lazaris's videos on crystals in that capacity. So what's worked better than Lazaris in other areas? Well, Tim Ferriss indirectly changed my life with the advocation of a virtual assistant, which has opened up my life by about 200%. I would say 200% of the bandwidth of my reality is a direct result of hearing about, looking for, finding, and then training over a multi-year period what has become the most valuable employee relationship of my life. That's led to just a tremendous amount of things, from the ability to get married. The amount of paperwork is mind-boggling. If it's a Filipina, as my wife is, and so any number of things have just opened up. Brian Tracy helped me form a framework of excellence and salesmanship that allowed me to leave home at age 17 and proceed in what has been a 30-year relationship as a self-employed landscape designer and installer. I would say that at least 15% of millions of dollars and just a clear framework of service-oriented thinking has come out of things like advanced selling strategies, which boil down to providing excellent service. Now, having married my wife in a somewhat unconventional paradigm, meaning I was highly traumatized at the time and was cognizant of how ineffective everyone around me was at responding to PTSD. So I'm annoyed, I'm highly critical of a culture that seems effective at producing large amounts of trauma for its members, and then largely ineffective at acknowledging and responding to that. So that irritated me, and rather than just be a critic, when I met someone that seemed highly traumatized in an environment which was making the trauma worse, I thought, well, I know what a big difference one person can make, and to a large extent, that person isn't showing up in my life. But let's see if I can practice what I preach. Let's see if I can be that one person for another. And as a result, of watching her life just take off through providing minimal opportunity, right? Just thousands of % of growth and development. I just see her blossoming, becomes a reason to live, to watch another person become their best, to matter in a meaningful way. And I thought, well, there's no one I have met in the world that I've been so useful for, as far as I can tell. I'm really useful in this situation. So that's as good a reason as any to prioritize my time. And since the only way to legally bring a less than wealthy Filipina into the U.S. is marriage, I explored every other option. Well, then get married, right? To facilitate a supportive relationship. And, so in the mix of all the various resources that I've exposed her to, Lazaris is, of course, part of that mix. It's not an unfriendly relationship, but she turns away, falls asleep, or leaves the room when I put on a Lazaris tape. But Brian Tracy, 30 years later, is exciting her with goals, with reminders of her values, etc. And so, I would definitely say that Brian Tracy is more medicinal for my wife than Lazaris is. For me, it's, certainly in some areas, and in Lazaris in other areas. But that's a phenomenal thing. Think and Grow Rich, more useful in developing a decision-making framework. Dale Carnegie's Guide to Effective Public Speaking, more relevant in opening up teaching, writing a variety of things that has expanded my impact in the world by 20%. I would say, Elon Musk's, Ashley Vance biography on Elon Musk was my doorway into investing. I was touched by the passion with which Elon puts himself into answering the question, what's needed for humanity to become its best, and how to invest all your time, all your money, all your energy into making that happen. And so I invested all of my money into Tesla as, in many ways, a protest to having Tesla be the single most shorted stock in history by Wall Street billionaires. It just pissed me off to see big money ganging up to crush someone from solving clean energy, from making safer cars, from becoming multiplanetary. And I didn't care if I made money or not. I wanted to have my money available for someone with that guts, with that courage, with that vision. I thought Elon can do more with my money than anyone I can think of. So here it is, right? If I could have wired it to him directly, I would have. But, here it is. And it was a surprise and very fun when that money went up 1,000%. Right? And that also was also, that's educational. That's life teaching me, that sometimes when you're committed to doing the right thing because it is the right thing, sometimes it works out. And obviously, Elon has brushed with being the wealthiest individual on the planet, and we're just getting started. So sometimes it works out for him as well, right? But, that's also, I've appreciated Elon's thought processes. And it's been useful to have a framework that everything that is everything is imperfect, but you can work really hard to make it less imperfect than it was before, right? And if something is worth doing, it's worth doing even if there's only 5% odds of success, 10% odds of success, right? Why not do the right thing because it is the right thing, not because it's easy or because it's likely? Elon thought his businesses would fail, that there was a 90% chance that Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City wouldn't make it. Because even that was fighting the odds. 100 car companies all failed in the last 100 years. So 10% was a good odds. But to do it anyway, because it's the right thing to do. Biographies have been useful. Gates' Constructive Pessimism. To out of paranoia, work harder to succeed, to understand how likely certain things are to fail, but to work like hell to see that they don't, right? So that's been useful. And all of these things are divergent from Lazaris. Experiential workshops on sexuality, on communication, 10 times, 20 times more valuable, more fun, more successful, more educational than anything in the Lazaris arena. Listening to Ray Dalio more recently about, again, decision-making, cycles of investing, incredibly useful, particularly the rise and fall of world orders in one of his recent books, and understanding, for example, the value of having an oasis outside of the United States, which is on a declining cycle in terms of world orders, dominant currency, etc., over the next 50 years. That's very useful to understand. And so, Gabor Mate, useful in the traumatic sector. Bessel van der Kolk, incredibly useful in providing empathy and insight on trauma and PTSD. Something that I was able to visit more than a dozen therapists, spend hundreds of thousands of dollars in whether it's Lazaris or any other number of healing modalities, and be completely ignorant about the biology of trauma and the phenomena of PTSD. So invaluable and, out of, Lazaris's purview. Travel, just believing that there was a place in the world that was more conducive to the persona, to the identity that I wanted to develop and cultivate. And discovering Thailand, 300% easier to be happy from the moment I sat down in the plane. An incredibly beautiful experience of presence, of warmth, of empathy with complete strangers transcending language. Again, vastly higher levels of happiness, well-being, of love and belonging than experienced within the Lazaris community or within the Lazaris framework of techniques. These are some of the high points. And I would say goal achievement is another. Yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily goals. A 400% expansion in achieving things that matter. Lazaris has mentioned, in fact, Lazaris sparked that thought on goals. But their techniques didn't involve, yearly, quarterly, monthly, just clearly written goals, right? But it's that system of yearly, quarterly, monthly, weekly, and daily goals reviewed at those periods, that really makes the difference. Journaling. What happened today? What do I feel about what happened today? What do I think about what happened today? And what am I going to do differently? What choices I'm going to make as a result of those things? And on to the next item and the next item. Journaling. Clarifying thoughts. A 10% improvement in well-being. A routine. A very structured routine. A 150% improvement in well-being. Lazaris mentions routine, but doesn't talk about writing the routine down and checking it off throughout the day and making sure each item on the list is done. That's 150% stable, reliable source of well-being relative to not having a clearly defined routine, which I've also experimented with in various areas. Tantric sexuality, a 300% enhancement in well-being when partnered with someone interested in that. And I'm sure there are many other areas, but the main point, for someone watching this video that's largely, as I was, because this is largely for my younger self, was largely of the opinion that Lazaris is the pinnacle of growth and opportunity and learning. 90% of my well-being has come outside of the Lazaris framework. And about 10%, maybe 15%, maybe 20% of that well-being has come by following techniques within Lazaris tapes, listening to Lazaris tapes, engaging within the Lazaris community. Now, that is not something to, poo-poo. My life is 20% better because I did these techniques, etc., with Lazaris. But nor is it something to elevate above. Tantric lovemaking, 150%, improvement in well-being, or goal accomplishment, or learning to run a business, or taking long vacations, which was another, structure of, well-being, learning to take 2 and 3 month vacations and work 4 hours a day, for example, which is, or forming a nonprofit in recent years where I now donate more of my time to the question how to facilitate the most amount of sustainable well-being with the least amount of time, money, and natural resources per person, with no awareness of boundaries. Is it next door neighbor? Is it someone in Bangladesh? How can you turn 30 cents into a moment of well-being anywhere in the world? How can you take a piece of wood and turn it into well-being for this situation, for that? How can you plant a tree and where in such a way as to facilitate global and visceral well-being for residents, etc.? So that's a very interesting question. It's worth living for, in my view. And so, that's playing a key role. Actually, in abundance, I would say, that my interest in running a competent nonprofit has tripled my income because I'm the donor, right? And so making money to make money to make money never did it for me. I've had all that I need, want of a money nature, since the age of 20. And it's been depressing, frankly, to think that that was supposed to bring about happiness and purpose. I mean, it's just boring mediocrity, to make money, to make money, to make money. It's pathetic. But to make money and figure out how every dollar can create the most amount of sustainable well-being for the most number of people, that's exciting. My well-being has gone up, but I've also decided in recent years since forming the nonprofit to make 3 times more money, because now there's a reason, right? I didn't want a Lamborghini. I didn't want a big house to clean. I didn't want, but this is exciting. And, again, who knew that forming a nonprofit would be the biggest stimuli to wealth? But it is, right? Who knew that's what would get me interested in investing? Lazaris casually mentioned on one of the tapes that if you want to be rich, you can't earn money, you got to invest money. Well, I didn't want to be rich. That wasn't the thing. But being a conduit of well-being and learning how to do that effectively. And then I don't want to go around asking people for money that don't want to give me money. So it's more fun to make the money and give it away and figure that out. So, that's exciting. I'm so grateful that I discovered how meaningful that is to me, right? It's worth getting out of bed for that. It's worth dealing with difficult clients for that. Right? It's worth improving and iterating my business for that. Not to have a bigger house. So that's, again, and so these are the things that have led to success, to fun, to a life worth living. These are the things that, give me joy, right? To watch my wife go from little or no ambition to being excited, thanks to Brian Tracy. That's exciting, right? That's interesting. To watch her take an interest in her, in bringing her siblings out of an abusive situation and take ownership of that and learn mastery in that. That's exciting, right? To be able to change someone's life for the better.